Hey, it's Paul. Welcome back to YNR Update. I'm going to do a special segment that's going to be a Q&A where I take your questions. You know, on Twitter I get to see your tweets, but it's not enough of an interaction. I figure this is a great way to do it. The first question I'm going to take is from Texas Girl, and her handle is @EleanorRoosevelt. The question is, it seems to me that execs want to distance the show from its Bell legacy. Why do you think this is? Well, you know, I don't know if you know this, but I do write as well, and one of the things I find with writers, especially writers that have been doing this for a while and have big egos and big reputations, is that they want to put their own fingerprint on whatever project there is. And I think with Chuck Pratt we see this because a lot of the characters are being changed so drastically from what they were, it looks like he really didn't look at the playbook. And some writers are stubborn in this sense where they want to put their own stamp and they want to shake things up. Problem is, with when a soap has been going for 42 years, you have a lot of people that are used to the progression of the characters, and when you give them exact right turns, it's hard for people to handle this. I mean, having watched the show for 34 years, there's certain things I know that Eric Braden's character, Victor Newman, would never do. And during this tenure, Chuck Pratt's tenure, I've seen him do quite a few things that I would never see him do. So it makes it sort of tough to follow. So as far as Bill Bell's legacy, I think there's a ton of respect as far as any writer that steps into the YNR to write, but you also get that, and it's a bit of a stubbornness where they want to do things their own way. They want to push through storylines that almost don't have enough respect. I mean, we can't expect every writer to go back and look at every episode, but every show comes with a Bible, and the Bible is what tells them, you know, how the characters have been developed, what their quirks are, or the fact that Nikki has MS and is an alcoholic, the fact that Neil has battled alcoholism, or Lily has had cancer. And so when you're writing, you have to refer back to this Bible in order to sort of stay true to the characters. The next question I'm going to take is one from Tara, and her handle is @Box5Angel. The question is, since there's less than a handful of soaps left, which do you think will be the last soap standing? It's a really tough question. I'd like to think that it's not going to come down to a last soap standing. I'd like to think that there are always going to be soaps. Now, if it comes time to whittle them down from one to another, it's a really tough question because of the 4 soaps, I only watched 2 of them, and that is The Bold and Beautiful and The Young and the Restless. So it's hard for me to jump into General Hospital shoes or Days of Our Lives shoes. Obviously, if there were any 2 to survive, I would pick the 2 that I watched, being familiar with them, because it's hard for fans because you all know what soap you're rooting for. So I don't know if that's enough of an answer, but it's a really tough one, seeing as I don't watch the other 2 soaps, and I do know that they have huge followings. But I'd like to think that in view of the fact that we went quickly from 12 soaps to 4, that these 4 soaps can last. I think The Bold and the Beautiful is probably the front runner in my eyes because it's a half-hour soap and it's got less of a budget than the other 2 do, and so I would have to tip my hat to that if I had to answer that question. The next question is from Tara as well, and she asked, was YNR the first soap you watched, or was it another one, and what got you into them? And that's a really funny question because I'm going to date myself. I started watching soaps, and I have to say I didn't start watching them. I started listening to soaps actually in the late 60s. That's right, I'm that old. I had a grandmother who listened to Peyton Place on the radio, and I think she also listened to either The Guiding Light or As the World Turns. So there were 2 soaps that were on the radio. Now I have to tell you, I moved to North America in 1971, and one of my earliest memories there were my mom looking for a job and having some downtime, and when she had downtime she would watch soaps. And as a kid in a new area, not having a lot of friends, what I would do is I would, you know, coattail my mom. I would watch television with her at least until I got, you know, some sort of a social life. So I can remember that far back, and I remember her watching Another World, which I got into as well, All My Children, which I liked, and The Edge of Night. And there was no Young and the Restless at this time, so those were the 3 soaps that I watched. And obviously The Edge of Night was canceled. I believe it was canceled in the early 80s. And All My Children, you know, we all know about All My Children. It was a lot of fun to watch. I had a lot of great memories watching that with, obviously Tad and Dixie, and I loved when they had Billy Clyde Tuttle on there, and I loved when Opal ran her Glamorama. It was a lot of great memories. And as far as Another World, I loved that. So, Mac and Rachel and the Frames, and it was a great one. I remember characters like Ray Liotta getting their start on that show. He played Joey. So I had a lot of great memories. All right, the last question I have is from Bello1980, and their handle is @Bellu1980, and it says, I hear #YNR and I think Bill Bell talk about his legacy. This show would be a disappointment to him. I think it's safe to say that this show would be a disappointment to Bill Bell. Bill Bell was a pioneer, and I don't know if a lot of you know, but he broke a lot of ground. Bill Bell knew how to craft a story, but he also knew how to craft a character. Now, when we think back of The Young and the Restless, and I can throw out names like Jill and Catherine and Victor and Paul and Nikki, part of the reason that we know these characters so well, Esther even, is that Bill Bell went to a great deal of trouble to create these characters. I remember back when Neil first came on and he met Drew. These were strong characters. Even how he spun African American characters off of Mamie Johnson. Like when we had Tanya Lee Williams on the show playing Dr. Olivia Winters. These were great characters. All the characters I mentioned were memorable characters. And even when we had villains like Sheila Carter, a lot was based on the character. You could put these characters in any storyline. That was the beauty of having character-driven storylines over just the storyline driving it and inserting characters. You will always remember what role the characters played, and they drove the storyline. So I would have to say that's the biggest difference with Bill Bell's regime as opposed to Chuck Pratt. Right now with Chuck Pratt, we see a lot of events. We saw a plane crash, we saw a building fall down, we saw an inferno. These are all events in a story. We saw a murder and it's dragged on for so long and we still don't know who committed that murder. There are events. I couldn't tell you about Austin even though he was murdered because he was such a secondary character, and Chuck Pratt didn't really do a good job of letting us know who Austin was. Even to the point when he was arrested for shooting Paul, we found out quickly that this had something to do with revenge because of his mom, and he wanted revenge on Avery. But we really didn't know about Austin as a person. Even after he was found dead, we still didn't know much about him, and that's a failure because it's hard to care about a murder when you don't care about the character. And a lot of people that have been writing on Twitter have been saying, just get this over with. This is dragged on for much too long. So that would have to be my answer. And yeah, it would be a huge disappointment to him the way the show is, because it is not driven by characters. It's story after story, and they all involve disasters and a lot of punch-ups. We're seeing characters punching each other all the time. So I would say if you want to win back the fans of this show, you've really got to drift back to character-based stories. So that's the final question. I really want to thank you guys for submitting, and I think I'm going to do this once a week. It's a great way to sort of communicate with you, and I love doing it. So don't forget to check us out. Please subscribe to the channel and follow us on social media. Thanks and have a great day. It's Paul, and it's YNR Update.